Bom dia a todos e todas. Bom dia, meu nome é Amir Labak, eu sou diretor, fundador do É Tudo Verdade, o Festival Internacional de Documentários. Pela primeira vez estamos começando mais cedo, 1 minuto mais cedo, pela lotação da conferência. Essa aqui é a 22ª Conferência Internacional do Documentário, que é um prazer e uma honra para o festival correalizar com a Cinemateca Brasileira, onde estamos essa manhã. Eu quero começar agradecendo a Maria Dora Mourão, diretora da Cinemateca Brasileira, que foi quem, há um quarto de século, já quase, veio conversar comigo no É Tudo Verdade, com a ideia da gente fazer expandir. Nós já, sempre, desde a primeira edição, nós já tínhamos atividades de debates e retrospectivas e discussões de filmes, mas com a ideia de expandir. E aí nós chegamos à ideia de fazer essa Conferência Internacional do Documentário, reunindo acadêmicos, cineastas, técnicos, críticos de cinema, para discutir a história e a estética do documentário. Muito nos honra que essa conferência tenha vingado, que tenha produzido alguns livros e tenha se desenvolvido em outras atividades, por exemplo, trazendo ao Brasil pela primeira vez a grande conferência internacional do documentário, que é o Visible Evidence, que a gente fez aqui no Brasil pela primeira vez na América Latina. E a conferência mudou de formato, mudou de parcerias, mas tem marcado a história do festival de uma maneira muito importante, porque nos ajuda a refletir melhor, com mais calma e entender um pouco melhor na curva do tempo o que tem acontecido com a produção documental no Brasil e no mundo. Para essa conferência, essa, como vocês sabem, a 20ª edição do festival, essa 22ª edição da conferência. E nesse marco, nós queríamos muito ter o privilégio de ter esse encontro que a gente vai ter essa manhã. O Bill Nichols já nos honrou participando da conferência algumas vezes. A primeira vez foi em 2000, logo na primeira conferência ele estava aqui. Ele participou desse encontro do Visible Evidence em 2008, aqui em 2006 no Brasil, como nós fizemos. Já tinha nos honrado em 2010, sendo também jurado do É Tudo Verdade. E para a gente é um imenso privilégio, porque o Bill Nichols é a referência principal no campo dos estudos da estética e da história do documentário. Ele, não só nessa área, ele é pioneiro e foi determinante para o desenvolvimento desses estudos, mas o Bill, a obra do Bill marca os estudos de cinema, estudos de mídia, estudos de cultura de uma maneira muito importante nesse último meio século. Ele é professor emérito do Departamento de Cinema da San Francisco State University, dirigiu o programa de graduação em estudos de cinema lá entre 1994 e 2001 e 2002 e 2007. Ele foi professor visitante em inúmeras universidades americanas e internacionais, não só de cinema e de cinema documentário, é importante frisar isso, também em antropologia, também em estudos culturais. Chegou depois curador convidado do San Francisco Museum of Art em 96, 98. É um consultor sênior do American Film Institute, do board de conselheiros da Film Foundation, criado por Martin Scorsese, e é autor de mais de uma dúzia autor e editor de mais de uma dúzia de livros, entre os mais importantes dos estudos cinematográficos recentes, entre os quais o grande clássico que saiu, que foi infelizmente já publicado no Brasil em 2 edições, que é a Introdução ao Documentário, que ganhou sua 4ª edição o ano passado, com a colaboração do Jamie Barron, nessa edição, publicada pela Indiana University Press. Esse livro, como eu disse, uma edição essa é a 4ª edição. Uma tradução da 2ª edição foi publicada no Brasil pela Papyrus e vocês devem encontrá-los. Entre os livros mais recentes do Bill, a gente tem The Cinema Alchemist, os filmes The Films of Peter Fogart, que ele coeditou com Michael Renoff. Tem esse livro, Engaging Cinema, An Introduction to Film Studies, que vai além do estudo do documentário. É um livro muito importante para a discussão de estética e a formação de todo mundo que estuda cinema. E eu lembro que ele, antes de ele ter dedicado esses livros tão fundamentais para a história estética do documentário, ele editou 2 volumes, Movies and Methods, filmes e métodos, nos anos 70 e anos 80, que são 2 grandes antologias que marcaram definitivamente o estudo, os estudos cinematográficos de maneira geral, não restritos ao campo específico do documentário. E ele nos honra esse ano também, fazendo parte do júri internacional do É Tudo Verdade. Então, eu quero agradecer em nome do É Tudo Verdade, em nome da Conferência, em nome da Cinemateca, essa nova vinda ao Brasil do Bill Nichols. Volto a agradecer a Dora Mourão e a Cinemateca pelo privilégio de estar abrindo essa conferência, que vai até amanhã, como vocês sabem. Sem mais, eu quero convidar Bill Nichols a abrir a 22ª Conferência Internacional do Documentário. Bill, welcome.
Bom dia. Well, thank you. Thank you, Amir, very much for the introduction. I wanted to thank Julia Mai for all her work making this week possible and getting me to and from things smoothly. Mateus Postana, who's in the booth, who's helped put today together. My juror colleagues, Andres Ditella and Elisa Kampai, who are here with me today, and of course, Amir Labaki, who showed you the new yellow-colored, is this working okay? The new yellow-colored introduction to documentary. I'm not sure if you said, he has a blurb on the back of it describing how great it is. So thank you. Thank you for your praise. And my talk today is not what is listed because I had to give a title a long time ago. And then after I gave the title, I was thinking, it's about time I talked about time. So today I'm going to talk about time. And it's something that is basic to cinema, but I hadn't really thought about it in the way I'll try to share today until now. So it's helped me rethink some things about documentary. It's still in an early stage because I'm not really done a lot of research on it yet. So this is more or less my own crude thinking about time and documentary. And I hope I'll be able to do more, and we'll see what kind of discussion there is today as well. So I'll be speaking about film and cinema, but the words now to me mean any kind of moving image, whether it's digital or celluloid or video. They all, I think, are speaking to the same questions, at least in terms of time. So I'm going to go back to the question. Well, I'm going to start with fantasy and fetishism, because as you will see, these are concepts that I think have a lot to do with how we experience time in film and in documentary. Now, fetishism, let me start. Fantasy is a way in which we replace reality with an imagined reality that gives us pleasure. Fetishism is an over-investment in reality that gives us pleasure. It's sometimes thought of as something tribal, but that's, I think, wrong. It's not that limited, but the idea that shells or beads could be valued as a fetish object and then traded for something like gold, which for us has more value than shells and beads because we fetishize gold and other cultures might fetishize beads. But we fetishize all kinds of things, from boots and clothes to people like stars. And that quality, I think, comes into play in cinema a great deal. The interesting part about it for me is that it's a paradox. We invest too much in something, and we also know that we're over investing. There's a paradoxical quality there. If that is true, then much of what I say today will make sense. There's a guy, Octave Manoni, who put it very well. He said, "Je sais bien, mais quand même." That is, I know very well, but all the same, I know very well I'm fetishizing, but I'm going to do it anyway. I know very well it's only a boot, but I love boots. Yeah. And there's that, that quality. It's interesting, too, that this idea of the fetish is one that Julia Kristeva said is true of language, all language. That is, we know very well that a language is just sounds or scribbles, marks on paper, and yet all the same, we invest a lot of energy and emotion in what those sounds mean. Love, war, fear. They're just words like guk, ble, gajopo. Now those are not real words, but if they had meaning, they might, affect you the way a word that has meaning does. Now, I'm going to use the word indexical or indexicality, which refers to Charles Peirce and his idea of signs. And the indexical sign is one that has a very forced, direct relation to what it represents. So we talk about indexical images. The photograph is like the person photographed. And I'm going to suggest that indexicality is fetishistic too. There's a forced correspondence, between the image and what it refers to, and it invites us to invest in what is no longer present. We only have the image. And we know very well that the person is no longer in the image, but all the same, we feel as if they are. And we know that. So this, I think, is true with fiction for the actors and the locations, and it's true for documentary for the people and situations that we see. Life appears before us. Life appears to appear before us. It seems to be present. And we know very well it isn't, but all the same, it is. It's a paradox. It is and isn't at the same time. And in that way, I think we treat documentary like a fiction unlike any other. It freezes time. It takes frozen frames of life and reanimates them. So it appears as if life itself has returned, paradoxically. How can it return if it's not there? And it returns, or documentaries bring us signifiers of life restored to life. So temporal indexicality, I'll sit for a little bit. I don't know, I may get too excited to sit, but I'll try. In temporal indexicality in film, this binding of one time to another incarnates reality. It breathes life back into what we see. It's a resurrection of the living, breathing moment itself, even as it is not that thing itself. The person that we see in an image, André Bazin said they were frozen in amber and they escaped the ravages of time. And that was a miracle for him. But I think he got it a little wrong. He was thinking of the image rather than the moving image, moving pictures. Moving pictures restore life, movement, action, expression. Bazin, like Walter Benjamin, was thinking of film as similar to a slideshow, of a slideshow of fixed but changing images. Walter Benjamin wrote, "Then came the film and burst this prison world we exist in asunder by the dynamite of a tenth of a second, so that now, in the midst of the far-flung ruins and debris, we calmly and adventurously go traveling." And he's right. If we think of moving pictures as a succession of fixed but changing images, then we're hopping all over to see what the filmmaker wants us to see. But temporal indexicality is a ribbon of continuous time, a ribbon of screen time, pinning us to its unfolding in the present, taking us back to the past when it was filmed, and proposing a possible future or futures that I'll discuss later. Indexicality restores the time during which something happened. We know very well it's past and gone, and yet all the same, we experience it as taking place again. Moving pictures are the dynamite of time, giving life to the far-flung ruins and debris of images. So we're no longer in a slideshow, we're at movement and activity and expression. And we allow this slippery, fetishistic collapse of realms to become a new paradoxical one. And it's one that no art had achieved before. And I think that's one of the reasons why documentaries about life, lived reality, are so compelling. Now, the risk comes when we forget that this is a paradox. It's paradoxical, I think, that we need paradox to understand cinema. If we engage, we need to engage with it as a fetish that is and isn't something at the same time. If it becomes an all-inclusive reality, it's the reality Baudrillard described as the simulacrum. We mistake a simulation for what it stands for and fail to see the paradox. The simulacrum, according to Baudrillard, and I think he was right, provides a model of the real without origin or reality, a hyper-real, which could remind you of AI-generated images, which I'll return to later. And Fred Jameson put it slightly differently, saying that the simulacrum becomes a, quote, derealization of the whole surrounding world. So we lose our sense of life and reality and engage with a simulacrum like Keanu Reeves in, what's that film? Oh, yes, Matrix, thank you. This is, I'm glad I have an audience to help. So our challenge is to be true to Manoni's dictum and to both see through and not see through the indexical representation at one and the same time. We have to recognize the simulacrum for what it is not in order to see it for what it really is. It's not reality. It's not the subsumption and consumption of reality that absorbs us totally. Now, all this, I think, came to a head in a way with cinema verite, or what I call observational and participatory cinema in the 60s. It intensifies this challenge. The camera only records what happens in front of it now as it's recording, and we witness this event later as if it were repeating, reincarnated for us. There's a vivid example of this in, well, almost all observational film, including the one that's here at the festival called The Invasion. But when D.A. Pennebaker recorded Bob Dylan interacting with a reporter from a magazine, Time, interesting Time, for 3 minutes and 20 seconds of their encounter in a single take, a long take. No interruption, no cutting. Our viewing time becomes a perfect indexical representation of the time of the event, the original event. So I want to show you that clip just to remind us of how we see something represented again as it was. No cutting, no editing, time indexically represented. So can we show that clip? May take a moment.
And there's pictures in it. I mean, those kind of, you know, those a certain class of people. It's a class of people that take the magazine seriously. I mean, sure, I could read it. You know, I read it on the airplanes, but I don't take it seriously. If I want to find out anything, I'm not going to read Time magazine. I'm not going to read Newsweek. I'm not going to read any of these magazines. I mean, because they just got too much to lose by printing the truth. You know that. What kind of truth? On anything, even on a worldwide basis. They just go off the stands in a day if they print really the truth. What is the truth? Really, the truth is just a plain picture. Okay. You know, a plain picture of let's say, you know, a tramp vomiting, man, into the sewer, you know, and next door to the picture, you know, Mr. Rockefeller or, you know, Mr. C.W. Jones, you know, on the subway going to work. You know, any kind of picture. Just make some sort of collage of pictures, which they don't do. They don't do. There's no ideas in Time magazine. There's just these facts. Well, which two are switched, because even the article on what you're doing, the way it's going to come out, don't you see, it can't be a good article, because the guy that's writing the article is sitting in a desk in New York. He's not even going out of his office. He's just going to get all these 15, reporters, and they're going to send him a quota, Now he's going to put himself on. He's going to put all his readers on, and another week will be, have some space in the magazine. But that's all. It means nothing to anybody else. I'm not putting that down, because people have got to eat and live, But at least be honest about it. Sure. I know more about what you do, and you don't even have to ask me how or why or anything, just by looking. Then you'll ever know about me, ever. I could tell you, I'm not a folk singer, and explain to you why, but you wouldn't really understand. All you could do, you could nod your head. You would nod your head.
You could be willing to try.
No, I couldn't even be willing to try, because it would be, there's certain things which, every word has its little letter and big letter.
Your friend has the right word, pigeonhole.
No, it's not pigeonhole. That's not the word at all. Every word has its little letter and big letter, like the word no. The word no, K-N-O-W. Okay, the word no, capital K-N-O-W. Like, each of us really knows nothing. Right? But we all think we know things. We really know nothing.
You're saying you know more about the right.
No, I'm saying that you're gonna die. You're gonna go off the earth. You're gonna be dead. Man, it could be 20 years. It could be tomorrow. Anytime. So am I. It's gonna be gone. The world's gonna go on without us. All right. Now you do your job in the face of that, and how seriously you take yourself. You decide for yourself. Okay. Now I'll decide for myself. Now, you're not going to make me feel unhappy by anything you print about me or anything, or anything like that. I just can't, you couldn't offend me. And I'm sure, I couldn't offend you. So, all I can hope for you to do is, all your ideas in your own head, somehow, wherever they are.
Do you care about what you're saying?
How can I answer that if you got the nerve to ask me?
Then you got
You got a lot of nerve asking me a question like that. Did you ask the Beatles that?
And is quite a character. And Timothy Chalamet does a pretty good job of imitating Dylan, but this is the real Dylan. No, it's not the real Dylan. It's a representation represented for us. And that swish pan that Pennebaker used quite often is a way of avoiding edits so that you stay in a long take. So that's one example of indexical temporality. I think another is the 9-minute, 29-second single take of a policeman choking the life from George Floyd, which you've probably seen part of or definitely know about. I know very well that this murder has come and gone, and yet here I am now watching it then again. And it's a paradoxical state of two moments of time wrapped around each other, and the existential state of our then seemingly unmediated empathy, that our feelings can flow toward the referent, toward the person being choked to death, as if we were there, but we cannot act and save a life. We oscillate between two times and occupy both. We experience an indexical bond, a passage of lived time and an experiential representation of historical time. I know very well, but all the same. I know very well, I'm watching an image, but all the same, it's as if I were there. So that's, this je sais bien, which we could all repeat, I know very well, but all the same. That's the motto for today. The indexical signifier of time gives us a one-to-one replica of something unique, but now in a different time and space. History appears before us. It's animated by motion pictures as it never had been before. We can feel what happened before with an empathetic power that can be extremely powerful. More so in motion pictures than in words in many cases. That's why the video of the murder of George Floyd had such an enormous impact rather than a verbal description. But why are indexical images so powerful? I wanted to just make a note of this because it occurred to me it's an interesting phenomenon in relation to Peirce's indexical signs. We can recall that the indexical representations often do not resemble their referent perfectly, and sometimes hardly at all. I'm not talking about film now, but in general. That is, an X-ray of the lungs, for example, corresponds precisely to what an image-making machine, an X-ray machine, gives us, but it looks nothing like a lung. The lines that create a fingerprint, if we put a fingerprint up, it would look like a labyrinth more than a finger. The fingerprint doesn't look very much like a finger. We know a map is not a territory, even though it has many perfect correspondences between itself and a territory. And we know that a clock as an object or watch bears no direct relation to the experience of time it seeks to represent. We strive to find a way to endow the unseen with visibility, X-rays, clocks, and so on. Not unlike, and we crave to take the measure of time and never quite manage, because it has an experiential quality that cannot be represented. I've made notes and edits, so I have to find my own place in some of this. The indexical film images, though, are different from the X-ray and the fingerprint in that they do resemble what they appear to represent so perfectly. So that, I think, is why they are so powerful. They do look like what they represent, unlike X-rays where you need a radiologist to interpret it. We can interpret an image as what it represents quite easily, we think. And we can see in film with moving pictures that they represent a flow of time, passing time. And all this is represented or articulated through the voice of a filmmaker that I'll come back to, but as a string of signifiers now at a remove from the original time at the moment they were represented. So indexicality has great use value in many fields, but it differs from what we find in film, where indexicality has, I think, more symbolic value. Its greatest use value in cinema, I think, is as evidence, as in the murder of George Floyd, or in evidence of what Bob Dylan said to the reporter without any manipulation of his words and paraphrasing or summarizing or ellipsis and cutting together and making a new comment that he didn't actually say. It's evidence of what was the case. It shows us accurately the actions and events that happened over a particular specific period of time. So indexicality, temporal indexicality in film authenticates the time in which something came to pass. That's not my bones. Yet. It establishes, in temporal indexicality, establishes a perfect correspondence between what was historical and past and what is existential and present. The appearance of movement is movement, Christian Metz once argued, and the appearance or reappearance of time is time as well. Movement is time, and film is the only art in which movement comes back before us indexically. Or as Metz once said, the cinema is a fetish that can be loved. And I think that's why we're all here. Therefore, the indexical film image is different from all those other forms of indexical representation where visual similarity is lost. The X-ray, the fingerprint, the map, the clock. The visual correspondence with film is almost perfect, and it's very powerful. We can overlook the reduction of 3 dimensions to 2 and all the alterations of time editing makes possible. The reduction of 2 dimensions via perspective and vanishing points has no effect on time, and the perfect correspondence remains within each shot between its duration on screen and the duration of what it represents, no matter how much editing there is in addition. It is screen time, the total duration of a movie, where film as a language emerges and the separation of the 2 types of time, indexical time and actual time, takes place. I'll come back to that. But the long take is where we get an intensified experience of the paradox, be it Touch of Evil, the murder of George Floyd, or the stunning TV series Adolescence, where each hour is a single continuous take, quite amazingly. In each case, we are there in the face of historical time as an event unfolds. An event. Events are interesting because events are what interrupt the flow of time. I wrote a paper at one point on 9/11 where the original flow of time was interrupted by the crash of the planes into the World Trade Center towers. And at first, no one knew what it was. What is this? What's happening in the very first minutes, an hour? It was not yet an event because no one knew how to label it, to punctuate it, to say this, and what was this? Where does this begin and end? This is an event. And very soon it was, declared to be an event as an act of terror. But at first it was just totally baffling. Events come out of a stream, the stream of time and our consciousness of it. Events punctuate that flow. So they're very crucial. Indexical time captures the time needed for us to recognize that an event has taken place, that it has emerged and can be seen. I know very well it's part of a flow, but all the same, I choose to punctuate it as an event, because events are our markings, our punctuation on life and reality. That punctuation provides the building blocks of narrative. A string of events with a beginning, middle, and end, not necessarily in that order, as Godard reminds us a long time ago. A string of events, beginning, middle, end, constitute a narrative, and narratives are what we use to endow time or history with meaning. And screen time is the time needed to create that narrative. So another angle on this is about truth. The event and experience I'm describing convey what I think of as a unique truth, a dialogical truth. That is, there is a truth in this form of experience that's unlike any other. It's a truth not of things and facts, not scientific truth, but film truth, cinema vérité, that emerges from the relation between the camera and the subject and the viewer. Something's witnessed and experienced and understood only because a filmmaker was present to represent it. It's a truth that emerges from a relationship rather than a truth that is out there beyond us, fixed and permanent. It's a truth that is fleeting, no longer something frozen in Bazanian amber, as if a triumph over time, but as a truth that only exists in time, in the truth, in the time of encounter. Martin Buber once wrote that all true living is relation, connection. And in that sense of relation, of connection to others, truths emerge in dialogue, in encounter, for which there is no other word, no other reality than the truth of that encounter, hopefully like today. So, wait a minute, I'm going to skip a piece here. So this kind of truth, this visceral, existential, embodied truth is what we experience of how we make a fool of a badly informed reporter in Don't Look Back, if we're Dylan, to die at the hands of somebody devoid of empathy in the video of George Floyd being killed, to feel what it's like to have a naturally unfolding flow of time in the opening long take of Touch of Evil shattered by the explosion that concludes the shot and stops the kiss between Charlton Heston and Janet Leigh, or to feel what it's like to have a family's normal morning routine shockingly disrupted by a SWAT team bursting into their home to arrest a 13-year-old boy for the murder of a classmate in adolescence. The long take, then, is one example of indexical time. The archival image raises another. When placed in a new context, and we've seen, I think, in the festival and almost every year and all the time, documentaries that use archival images, when placed in a new context, when recruited to an archive of repurposed signification in a new film that makes use of archival images, they become an index of historical time now seen as past, done and gone, before the making of the film we now witness. If observational and participatory filmmaking represents what happens before the camera now, as if for the first time, again, the archival image presents an unfolding of a past time, now seen as if it were present, represented, present once again, even though this camera and this film were not there at that time. Past historical time is doubled. The observational image represents past time when the film was shot, but the archival image represents what in English is called past perfect time, the time that has concluded before something else begins. I spoke is past time, but I had spoken before he arrived is past perfect time. I had cooked dinner before they arrived. I had eaten breakfast this morning before I came here is past perfect time. And archival images represent past perfect time. We know very well this time is long gone, and yet all the same, we experience it as it is present once again, but in a present prior to other events, in a past perfect. But there's more to this time than its past and past perfect forms. These 2 points in space, past perfect, create a line or connection, a vector with directionality, like a flow that's now aimed. The then and now of viewing establish a vector between our present moment of viewing and the past moment of filming. Archival images add another point to create 2 points in the film itself. They carry forward a latency, a potentiality, and this is where the future comes in. This latent time is where the connection, the line that we draw, extends into the future. Something more, and we feel, I think I do in many documentaries, something more may happen based on what has happened. In this lies the power film to offer a vector towards an as yet unrealized future. As a future eventfulness, its specificity is uncertain. We don't know what the future will be, and it remains an unfixed flow, but its possible shape, be it an imagined linear vector, a spiral, a curve, a dialectical disruption, a constant wobble, or a flow that is now more directed one way than another, that can be brought into being by the experience of those specific actions and events that have come before. And this is where I think some of documentary suspense lies. It's not that just the expense of what will happen next in the story, but in our world, the historical world, when we see a documentary. Like images shot for the film, the archival image is an image of what is done and gone, but together it builds a potential trajectory, a teleology, toward an indeterminate future time of continuation, completion, and possibly resolution. At least I think we hope for an event again that will come out and define something that will bring closure to what we are seeing. The book of Revelation speaks of end time, the end time, when the apocalypse has happened and God has brought the end of time and the ascent of those who are chosen to heaven. A perfect conclusion to a very dark story sometimes. So we may imagine a time in the future that's no longer available to those caught in an archival image, but available to us as a result of what we witness. In this sense, our viewing present is not devoid of history. Some write that we have reached the end of history, and I think viewing documentary and its projection of a potential future refutes that. It's a moment in our present of viewing in which there continues to be an unfolding, imperfect, unpredictable, with only the teleology, the direction we, as witnesses to the past, assign to it. We feel suspended between what has come to pass and what has yet to happen, guided by that vector drawn between past and present. So I want to show you another clip. This is from a film by Peter Forgas, a Hungarian filmmaker who came here several years ago. He and I did some Q&A sessions after a retrospective of about a dozen or so of his films in Rio, Sao Paulo, and Brasilia. And this is one of the films that was shown in that retrospective, Maelstrom. his films are made entirely of archival images. They're hard to get hold of, but Peter Forgash himself has a website, and he will happily share his films with you, but they're commercially not available. Maelstrom was made from home movies by the Pierbaum family, which was a well-off Jewish family in the Netherlands in the 1930s and 1940s. And he also got access to the Seyss-Inquart home movies. And Seyss-Inquart was an Austrian who was the Reich Commissioner for the Netherlands. That is, he was like the president or governor, the person in charge of all the activity by the Nazis after the occupation, including the SS and all of that. So we will see in this clip, it's into the film a fair while, so things have gotten from the 30s to the 40s bad for Jews in the Netherlands under the Nazi occupation. And we'll see what that means for Seyss-Inquart as the commissioner overseeing everything, and for the Pierbaums, who are now subject to many rules regarding the conduct and activities of Jews in the Netherlands. So can we show that clip, please?
...27 april 1942. Verordening van den Rijkscommissaris. Een Jood die zich in het openbaar vertoont, moet een Jodenster dragen. Zich voor eventuele deelname.
So, it's still not me. It's a very disturbing direction that the film takes, because it's showing how the Nazi leaders take over the Klingendale estate, build a tennis court, Seyss-Inquart does, and then he has his buddy Heinrich Himmler there playing tennis, while the Pierbaums cannot be seen in public because of the rules and have to sit on their roof. So there's immobility, stasis, confinement versus movement, freedom, flow, that the Nazis have at this point, that, as you can see in the very last part of the clip, is a foreboding of the concentration camps to which the Germans will be deporting the Jews. There is in all this, I think, a sense of suspense that brings the future into play, in that we see it now, it happened then, and we as viewers now want in some way to warn the people in the film, get out, don't stay, flee. But we're powerless to do that. And that's part of what creates a tension in the viewing of it. Because he puts us in a position not unlike the position we're in many Hitchcock films, where we're rooting for a character to do something and achieve their goal against odds that are difficult to overcome, and in this case, impossible in the short term to overcome. And most of the Pierbaums, for example, lost their lives in the concentration camps, but their footage was preserved by one of their clerks in the store they had, so that Forgách could use it to make this film. And this idea of going from the present to the past in a film in order to create a vector towards a future is, I think, exactly the primary purpose of Night and Fog, Alain René's film. And I think of this as a film with its fluttering between a past perfect of Nazi atrocity that had happened already when René made his film in the 50s, a present time when he shot his film of loss and ruin, and a future conditional time of safeguards against the repetition of a terrible past. That is, I think the film almost compels us to project that future of what will be. It asks us to do that. The future latent in the flow of time is always conditional because of the nature of the future. This will be the case is not what we hear or see. That would be a prediction, which is different. It's rather, this might come to pass. This may be what happens. That's a more accurate description of how we imagine the future will unfold. Predicting is a kind of cheating, and often wrong. So the shape of things to come is yet to be seen, but its potential outlines can be imagined from the trajectory proposed by the film. So I wanted to again show a clip, this time of just the beginning and end of Night and Fog, so we can see without the entire film a sense of how René sets up the present, takes us back to the past with archive footage, and then at the end returns to the present to ask us a question about the future. So it's sort of a textbook example of what I'm trying to convey that in other films I think is more implicit, like in The Invasion, the film that depicts what life is like in Ukraine now, without no definite claim about what the future will be, but we can project a potential future in one direction more than others because of the way the film sets up a trajectory. So let's see how that plays out in Night and Fog.
Qui de nous veille de cet étrange observatoire pour nous avertir de l'avenue des nouveaux bourreaux? Ont-ils vraiment un autre visage que le nôtre? Quelque part parmi nous, il reste des capots chanceux, des chefs récupérés, des dénonciateurs inconnus. Il y a tous ceux qui n'y croyaient pas, ou seulement de temps en temps. Il y a nous qui regardons sincèrement ces ruines, comme si le vieux monstre concentrationnaire était mort sous les décombres, qui feignons de reprendre espoir devant cette image qui s'éloigne, comme si on guérissait de la peste concentrationnaire. Nous qui feignons de croire que tout cela est d'un seul temps et d'un seul pays, et qui ne pensons pas à regarder autour de nous, et qui n'entendons pas qu'on crie sans fin.
It's probably up there in the booth hiding somewhere. But I think you get a feel for it. If we can get it, let me know, Mateus, and we could show the beginning too in backward order. But this gives you a sense of that what we see are ruins, but the narration, the voiceover is calling on us to think about what will happen next and what we have to actually do in the present to guide the future in one direction rather than another. A very timely kind of question, I think, not only for those of us in the U.S., but with one of your former leaders verging toward trial and possible conviction, and the whole world in a kind of chaos right now, economically, if not socially and politically and otherwise. Do you see the other clip, or shall I go on? I'm gonna assume they don't have it available right now. Okay, so I've been talking about the indexical image as well as indexical time, and how indexical images in film are quite different from other kinds of indexical representations that don't resemble the referent as much. But I want to also say that this relation of past and future is not as dependent on indexical images as it might appear, and as I've perhaps suggested as a misleading kind of suggestion. Many of us take a film like Waltz with Bashir, for example, if you've seen it, to be a documentary, even though it's animated for the most part. Does that animation then bind us to a past and present in the same way a realist representation would? I think in one sense it does. Differently, but I'll try to say how. We know from external sources, that is, we can look up and find out that it's the case, that it has an historical referent. Israel's war against Lebanon in 1982. That happened. We may not have indexical images of it in the film, but we do have the filmmaker's testimony of it via the indexical trace of his voice. The filmmaker speaks to us in the film about his past. What he said in the film then, at the time of shooting, is matched by what he says now in the time of viewing. There's a forced correspondence in the duration of the two events, just as there is in the images of George Floyd's murder. And when you think about it, sound and speech can only exist in time. Talking takes time. That's why we're all here in this one room and for an hour or two. Indexicality persists on the soundtrack as it does in fiction films, but it's a fiction unlike any other. It binds us to the testimony we witness as if we are there at the time of the speaking, for the duration of the speaking, even though we know very well we are not there then, but here now. So let me show you, let's try to do this one, a clip from Waltz for Bashir. This is the very first flashback that Ari Folman, the filmmaker, has as he talks about his past. So it's a recreation or reenactment of his involvement in the war in Lebanon. But as we will see through the course of the film, it's a fantasy. It's an imagined reality that he's invested in to replace the actual reality. So let's try that clip from Waltz with Bashir.
My meeting with Boaz took place in the winter of 2006. That very night, for the first time in 20 years, I experienced a flashback to the war in Lebanon. Not just Lebanon, West Beirut. Not just Beirut, but the massacre at the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps.
Okay, so in this case, the animation, like the archival image, returns us to a past perfect of what happened before Ari Folman, the filmmaker, tries to make sense of it. Unlike the archival images, the animated images don't anchor us in what happened then, but in what he imagined happened then as a fantasy. As you can imagine, the soldiers did not arrive naked in the water and emerge from the water to walk onto the land to fight a war. There's a kind of innocenting, making innocent of himself in that image, as there is at the end when he is standing there with his rifle and the people are fleeing past him who are fleeing from a massacre. It's as if he is a mere witness to an event that he had no direct part in. And part of the work of the film then is to understand and come to terms with what his role really was and why the trauma of it has been difficult, made it difficult for him to retrieve that true memory. It's only at the conclusion of the film that we have actual archival footage of the massacre Folman tries to repress from memory and finally retrieves. It projects a future latent with the recovery of memories that may guide him and perhaps us toward recognizing what has already happened and considering how to prevent its repetition. Exactly what Night and Fog did. And if you see Chronicles of the Absurd, it's another film where the indexicality of the voice is what bears the burden of documentation, of documentary representation, rather than the images, which are for the most part, still images and fragmentary, not really capturing past events, but alluding to them, whereas the voices are indexically, temporally accurate to what was said and done at a past time, as in a secretly recorded interrogation or interview with the police, and one of the people the Cuban police are hounding. So to put some of what I've been saying in another way, it's that we can say that the indexical image is not only not necessary, but also not sufficient for a documentary. Indexical temporality is sewn into the long take inevitably, but long takes are seldom enough to make a documentary. So that indexicality is local, but it is not necessary for the entire film. Screen time takes on another quality, which I'll come back to. Surveillance footage, for example, is evidence. Yes, it's used in trials, as it was with George Floyd, or sometime earlier, the beating of Rodney King in Los Angeles. Thank you. But documentaries have the voice of the filmmaker also embedded in them. And this is where I think it frees the film from indexicality altogether, if we wish to do so. This is the creative treatment part of Grierson's definition of documentary as a creative treatment of reality. This is yet another paradox in the representation of events. We engage with a language. We engage with signifiers, sound and image, selected and arranged by the filmmaker to address us in their voice, to give representation to what the world we know is like for them. And as Kristeva suggested, in any language, we engage with signifiers, with sounds and images, the sound and fury of images, as if they were more than sounds and images, not just gaga, blip, blah, that. But when we invest them with meaning, we know all the same that they are just sounds and images. But that is what creates a language, so that Portuguese or English or Spanish or French or Mandarin is something, when we know it, in Dylan's sense, when you know it, you know what it means. And if that's true, then I think it's possible to say, somewhat argumentatively perhaps, that AI, artificial intelligence, does not negate the documentary and does not render it null and void if we no longer depend on the indexical image as such. Because AI sounds and images lack a referent in the historical world, even if they appear to have one. But this is also true for the animated documentary. Paradox takes a different form now. We know very well that what we behold lacks an historical referent, but at the same time we may act as if it did. But do we know very well that a referent is missing? This is crucial. I think that this is where the whole question of fakes and fake news comes up. But do we know what we are seeing? Prior to AI, the paradox was in the knowledge that film time is not historical time, but we can mistake it for that time all the same, largely because in each shot, there's a forced correspondence between the two times. the indexical temporality of the shot, the long take. AI bursts that correspondence asunder. It breaks it up. The shot no longer testifies to the duration of a given moment as it unfolds and comes into being, possibly as an event like a butterfly from a cocoon. Instead, it testifies to the amount of time with which the filmmaker wishes to endow the event and the shot that represents it. In other words, we must know that we're in the presence of AI images and therefore in the presence of a new fiction that is unlike any other. In this way, perhaps paradoxically, paradox is crucial to documentary representation, even if we don't feel like we're being confused and befuddled all the time. If we know very well, but all the same, I think we're safe. We can still experience with AI past events vicariously. We can still experience them empathetically and viscerally. We can still experience them in an embodied affective form by the dint of the paradox that they appear indexically tied to our historical world, even though we know they are not. AI then requires a meta-communication. It must tell us what it is. And that is built into animation by the very animated image. We know that the image of Ari Folman in his car driving is his choice of how long to represent that event. It's not the actual time. It's not temporally indexical to that time. We need something that says, this is a manifestation of generative AI, not of the indexical representation that you would have beheld if the camera had been there at the historical event it represents. The referent is lost, but the paradoxical experience of knowing and not knowing can persist if we know what we are seeing. It's a paradoxical, fetishistic belief that continues to guide us through our experiential encounter with what has come and gone. And it can continue to sustain the suspense that points us toward a future unfolding. AI can amaze and it can deceive. Without that meta-communication, we slip back into the Baudrillardian world of the simulacrum, where reality evaporates entirely, where we find a derealization of the whole surrounding world, where fake news and misrepresentation becomes a new reality unanchored to what is true. So with documentary, it is not our awareness of history itself, but a representation of history from a specific perspective, the filmmakers, that suspends us in time and projects a potential future. As with a fiction, an AI-generated documentary lacks an historical referent, but we can still take there to be one, paradoxically, if we know that what we see is an AI documentary, never that, period, if we know it's an AI documentary. We know very well, but all the same. Documentary in this way is a fiction unlike any other. AI documentaries are coming. We can be sure of that. In fact, just the other day while I've been here, I was invited to be a judge of a festival in Silicon Valley up in California, which will be a screening of a group of films, half of which were made by documentary filmmakers and half were made by AI. And the role of the judges is to say which are which. So I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know how accurate. I'm very bad at guessing Oscar winners, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure how good I'll be at guessing AI. And I don't know whether these films, I think they will not say this is AI, because that would spoil the experiment. But we'll see what we see soon. Stay tuned. I'll let Amir know what I find out. So when we're in the face of AI, I think we continue to have the opportunity to experience paradox. What we now see does not represent that which what it refers to would represent. It is a language, not a copy. And in these manifestations then become a form of play. Just as a dog's nip is not the same as a dog's bite, so a representation is not what it represents. It takes a given reality and makes it into something else. I'm wearing out the sign language people, but thank you for doing this. A nip turns fighting into playing. It is a meta-communication that refers to another action, the bite, but it's not the same as that action. It no longer signifies what that to which it refers would signify. These are paradoxical ways of putting things, which I know are challenging, but that's what we're trying to capture. It's no longer with nips or film. It's not a question of force, impact, causation, but of signs and meaning, language instead of physical reality. We no longer measure things in terms of energy expended, but of meaning conveyed. Temporal indexicality, along with the indexical image, is like the nip. For one thing, in temporal indexicality multiplies time. It can establish a past perfect, a past, a present, and a conditional future. A virtual flow of time endowed with a vector, a directionality that is a result of the filmmaker's language and speech to us. It mediates reality. It depends on paradox. It opens up a world of encounter where this distinct form of understanding, what I've called dialogical truth, embodied truth, experiential, empathetic truth, embedded in the very substance of duration, comes into play. This is similar to play as a distinct form of activity, and isn't all art and all language in some sense play? We use sounds and images to play with space and time. Film's basic unit, the shot, matches real lived time. But as a language, as an assembly of shots, screen time differs from real time. It belongs to the realms of fantasy, fetishism, and language. But we know what we engage in refers to something else. Nips to bites, play to competition and cooperation, winks to blinks, maps to territory, film to reality, art to life. But all the same, it's different. It's a difference that makes a difference. Fantasy and fetishism, be it play or language or art, carries with it, or carries us into a magical realm that frees us from the power of physical matter and raw energy. Reality bites. Documentary does not. We know this very well, but all the same, documentaries do bite in their own unique way. Documentary invites play with time as well as space, with the past as a flow that can be made into events, into history, into narrative, and thereby endowed with meanings it would not have otherwise possessed. Documentary, therefore, is an art like any other. Time's up. Okay.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to hear you. Agora acho que vamos começar com as perguntas. Se alguém quiser, por favor, é só levantar a mão. Não.
Bill, obrigado. A pergunta que eu quero te fazer tem parte dessa reflexão que você acabou de fazer aqui com a gente a respeito do tempo e do documentário, um pouco está nessa nova edição do seu livro, Introdução ao Documentário. Eu queria que você, se você pudesse brevemente resumir para as pessoas, quando você sentou e foi desenvolver uma nova edição 10 anos depois, além da questão da inteligência artificial, o que mais te pareceu que mudou na produção de documentários que te motivou a continuar renovando o que você estava pensando? Além da questão da inteligência artificial, o que mais se colocou em 10 anos, quer dizer, na última década, acho que a edição anterior do teu livro tinha 10 anos. Nessa década, o que mais mudou?
Well, thank you for the question. This is the 4th version, and one of the things that changes is in each edition, the opening chapter on defining what is a documentary is different. In one, I said there's no definition, that it's evolving and emerging all the time, and no one way to capture what documentary is. In another, I said it's largely prototypes, which are models that are not copied, but they are used as a starting point and an inspiration for work that is similar. And in the new edition, I go back to John Gerson's creative treatment of actuality as a very helpful definition, because it captures the attempt to deal with reality and the language that we need to do that with, which is the language of cinema, of sounds and images that become signifiers. This version also is collaborative in that Jamie Barron, who's also a documentary scholar, contributed to it, and she has a chapter on history and documentary that is largely about the role of the archival image. So archives and archival images get more attention. We wrote it, whereas this is 25, 24, 23, and then it takes about a year to edit and come out. But as AI was emerging, this is so new. that when we were writing the book, there were no AI documentaries. I don't know of one yet that's a complete work, but it was clearly on the horizon. And I happened to see of art documentary film in the Denver Art Museum that was about colonialization in the French colonies in North Africa that was entirely AI. So it was one example, although it wasn't presented as a documentary, it was presented as an artwork, but it was an AI documentary where every image was created by AI, and the voices also were created by AI. And it was presented more like Waltz with Bashir. It was not an attempt to represent real reality as we see it in indexical images, but it was a very evocative portrait of what life is like and how it is experienced by the colonized. So it was in a poetic form. It was quite beautiful, and it got me thinking about the need to, include some consideration of AI, which will continue. It also, one of the biggest differences for a reader is that there are new examples and new examples of films that are more recent. That simply did not exist in the second or third edition, or certainly the first, like Minding the Gap, which is one I ignored at first because I thought it was just about skateboarders, but it's actually about their families and the traumas that they experienced as kids, because they're teenagers, not unlike adolescents, but how they dealt with family trauma and skateboarding as one of their outlets. But the film is really an exploration of what it was like to live in a family unit that was itself dysfunctional. So the film takes up, the book takes that up, or others like Small Enough to Fail, Abacus, Small Enough to Fail, which is a film about the only bank where the owners, who were all Chinese American in New York, were arrested and charged with the crime of creating the 2008 crisis by giving obviously knowingly bad loans. They had to fight the charge for several years. It was a terrible ordeal. They were tried by jury and found not guilty. Their practices were ethical and proper, but the government tried to make them an example rather than Morgan Stanley or Chase Bank or Bank of America or Wells Fargo, the real perpetrators of the fraud that led to the 2008 crisis. It also rethinks how documentaries represent social issues. There, in the third edition, we talk about social and personal documentaries, ones that are more diaristic but relate to social issues. In the new edition, we talk about the social representation, questions about global warming or other questions in terms of portrait and landscape, where the portrait ones, like in printing out on a computer, the portrait ones are more vertical and focused on a particular person or persons, and the landscape ones are broader and look at the big picture. And I think that's a sort of mimicking of inductive and deductive logic, where you start with the big picture and an assumption and then move in to demonstrate that that is correct. Or you work inductively and start with a particular instance, a person's experience, and then try to move out to show how that is representative of a larger issue, such as we saw in Searching for Amani, I think it's called, the film set in Kenya, which is about Simon, a boy trying to understand his father's murder. And the filmmakers move out from that to look at conflicts between pastoralists who are trying to find grass and other vegetation for their cattle in an area going dry, and the farmers and conservationists who are trying to keep the grass for the wild animals and to protect wildlife from human encroachment. So those would be a few of the things that motivated the new version.
Só uma informação, esse filme que ele citou sobre os bancos, sobre pequenos bancos sino-americanos mantinham os depósitos lá, a gente passou no É Tudo Verdade, chama, em português o nome é Abacus, Pequeno Bastante para Condenar, é dirigido pelo Steve James, dirigiu Basket Blues, é um filme de 2016. Então, só para registrar que é um filme que a gente teve o prazer de passar aqui, quem podia assistir 8 anos atrás, na competição.
Que a próxima pergunta?
Yeah, the Steve James, who made that, also made a film you may have seen called Hoop Dreams, about two young basketball players in high school who hope to become professionals and the troubles they have. Yeah.
Oi, Bill. Bom dia. Muito obrigada pela palestra. Foi muito boa, foi incrível. Obrigada. E eu queria muito ouvir comentários seus sobre a relação de tempo, que foi o principal assunto da palestra de hoje, relacionado com o modo reflexivo de documentário, de acordo com o seu livro, né, Introdução ao Documentário. Especial que ontem a gente eu dei uma aula sobre a Introdução ao Documentário e é muito massa estar aqui te ouvindo. Obrigada.
Oh, well, thank you. What were you saying yesterday? Maybe I could learn something. Yeah, when I was saying that AI has to meta-communicate to tell us this is AI, and there is no referent, but it is referring to something as if there were one, that is a reflexive move. And it's not reflexive in the sense that the entire work has to be calling into question the assumptions of documentary, which is what a number of the reflexive films and mockumentaries like This Is Spinal Tap do. They constantly are reminding us that it's a fiction, but it's like a documentary, but it's not a documentary, and we see that over and over. But it's a kind of reflexivity that has to occur at some point so that we get it, that we understand that it's not indexical, but generated by an algorithm. It's very much like irony. And irony is another form of paradox. So I could have given the talk today on irony, because that's where something is and isn't at the same time. I say, you really look beautiful today. And if I say it in the right tone, you'll know that I mean you don't look so beautiful today, right? But you have to get it. If you think I mean it and you really look beautiful today, you miss the irony. So irony has to be labeled. You have to know, for example, that a wink is not a blink. If it's a blink, it's just, oh, my eye was, I had to blink, sorry, I didn't mean anything. But if you wink, you are trying to mean something, and the other person needs to get it, to understand, he's winking at me. Aha, that means something. What does it mean? So you go on. But so yes, in that sense, the questions I've been posing today about paradox are reflexive, and the awareness of the paradox is a kind of meta-awareness. It's learning to learn about documentary because we're no longer engaged directly with what the subject matter is, but engaged with how that subject matter is being conveyed to us. So it's learning to learn how to understand a documentary. And it's taken me a long time to come back, as I said, to talking about time. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we need to close the table. Precisamos encerrar a mesa, todo mundo.
É uma questão de tempo, é isso? Então, mais uma última pergunta aqui. Vamos lá, quem levantou a mão? Então, passa aqui.
Oi, Bill, tudo bom? Meu nome é Piero e eu achei interessante você falou retomando o Bob. Alô, retomando o que o Bob Dylan falou sobre verdade, você falou que a verdade vem do encontro, das conexões e das experiências, né? E você mencionou a série Adolescência. Eu queria acrescentar a série, o filme que está sendo exibido aqui no É Tudo Verdade, About a Hero, em que o diretor ele constrói uma história, não sei se você já assistiu esse filme, a partir de uma narrativa construída pela inteligência artificial, levando em consideração os filmes do Werner Herzog, né? Isso é dito no início do filme, a gente sabe, mas é assustador o resultado, né? Eu ainda não sei o que eu penso sobre esse filme, mas eu achei o resultado assustador. E aí eu queria que você falasse um pouco se você está otimista ou pessimista com essa nova geração de seres humanos que chegam à Terra, né? A geração beta, que começa a nascer em 2025, porque uma das coisas que mais me chocaram nesse filme About a Hero e também na série Adolescência é o olhar do vazio, né? É aquele olhar do vazio, principalmente dos jovens, que não conseguem ter essas conexões que você citou. Eu queria que você falasse se você está um pouco otimista ou pessimista com o nosso futuro.
Well, it depends on the time of day. I start optimistically and then I start to worry. So yeah, there's a lot to worry about, and I haven't seen that, so I look forward to seeing what I find when I see the film about Herzog. But yeah, with AI, like with animation and film in general, there is no limit. There are no rules, and anything is possible. And then we have to figure out what's going on. The whole world of AI, is far larger than documentary or film, and its impact on our future, it's yet to be determined. I certainly worry about it. I know it's being abused pretty regularly, and the internet is, I was saying in an interview yesterday, sort of like the Wild West. It's unlike journalism in the past where things were filtered and there were standards. Anyone can put anything online anytime, anywhere, almost. And even more so since the inauguration of our current president in the US. So it's very, very much up to us. And the adolescence, I think, is a very painful, disturbing look at how a young boy of 13 can become a killer, not because it's in his nature and not because his family induced a trauma. They take pains in interviews, the filmmakers, to stress that the family has its difficulties. The father's volatile, he has a temper, but it doesn't seem like those are the reasons why the boy kills. And the main suggestion that the film makes is that his way of seeing reality has been poisoned by the internet. not the internet as some monster, but as other users use it and create a world that is distorted. Part of it is that the victim was someone who used the internet to mock this young boy. Part of it is incel, involuntary celibacy, the incel culture that blames women for male inability to find a partner. They're to blame. There's in the film, they mention an 80-20 rule, that 80% of women only are attracted to 20% of men, so the rest of the men are involuntary. They can't help it. They cannot find a partner because women don't want them. And there's a portion of one of the episodes about whether the boy is ugly, which is very painful to watch because it's clear that in many ways his self-esteem is shaped not just by his loving parents, but by an impersonal, in one way, murderous internet that his parents don't even know he's involved in. And there's another sequence where the detective who's trying to investigate and get the facts about what happened goes to the school hoping to find evidence about the knife that was used. And his son, who's in the school, has to explain to him what symbols on an internet page mean. He has no clue, and the parents had no clue the son was involved in this world. So cluelessness is not a good thing to have. So being aware of what we're up against and aware of its power as well as its ability to amaze, I think is very important. We need antidotes and context and awareness if we're to deal with machines that are us in another form. They're humans unlike any other because they're us. They have our knowledge from the past installed in them. And therefore, they have all of... I was just reading a book in French by Bernard Minier. It's just called M, the letter M. But it's about an AI machine, an algorithm that will solve all your problems. It's emerging. It hasn't been completed yet. But the idea is that it will tell you if you should come to this talk. It will tell you what you should have for lunch based on your chemistry, because it'll know what your balance of nutrient needs is. It'll solve life's problems for you. And what do you do? And part of the answer to that is there is actually a very, very malevolent force behind this new AI, which is called Deus, God. So it's a quite interesting novel, and thankfully it's only a novel, but it's suggestive of what we must contend with.
Então, Bill, thank you so much, Bill. Muito obrigado a vocês todos. Obrigado à Cinemateca. Muito obrigado. Nós vamos voltar às 2h30, então, com o debate sobre o livro dedicado ao It's All Tudo, Also Else, debate que vai ser conduzido pelo Carlos Augusto Calil, com a Caterine Benamu, que escreveu o livro. Muito obrigado, bem-vindos. Até mais tarde. Many thanks.